It's Patio Side Chats with Fernando Martinez from Chaparral Pavers with tips and advice on landscaping and gardening. Here's Fernando Martinez.
Yes, indeed. I am Fernando. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here with me on the patio here on this Patio Side Chats with Chaparral. Today, I've got another good show lined up here. I had a question during the week. I was actually in the bank, and the teller there, really nice gal, was talking to me about growing things, and I can't grow anything, and I don't have a green thumb, and I kill everything, nothing grows. Even though she did have a nice potted plant there on her desk, and it seemed to be doing just fine, and I was trying to encourage her to say, yeah, you can do it. You know, don't tell yourself that you can't grow things or that things don't work out for you or I kill everything that I plant. And so I got a little inspiration for this show, and I was thinking about it because I have heard it throughout the years of my being in this industry. And so today, today's topic for this show is going to be called the green thumb. You can have a green thumb because it's actually really simple. I've come up with 3 steps, essentially, and that's all there is to having a green thumb. If you think about something in each of the 3 of these categories and do that throughout the year, you will absolutely have good luck with plants, and something will grow. Not everything, because not every plant is meant to grow in every situation. So that could be some of what gets you to think that you can't grow things. You may have been doing something that, you know, maybe you were led to believe by a nursery, or you got some type of plant that really doesn't grow here, or it was an annual and you didn't realize and you thought it was supposed to live forever, and it's actually supposed to die within 6-8 months, you know. So there's some misnomers out there, but here's the 3 steps: watering, fertilizing, and pruning. And hopefully it sounds silly to you because it is really simple and there's not a whole lot to it. But you have to do something in each of those 3 categories. Again, watering, fertilizing, and pruning, and that's it. So when we do new landscapes, there's not a whole lot of pruning to do for a couple of years. So really it's just the watering and the fertilizing. And a lot of the plants, they come with fertilizer in them when they're first planted. Usually whoever's doing the planting, or if you're planting, hopefully you're putting compost or fertilizer in the hole. So for the first, few months, there's no fertilizing. First couple of years, usually there's not a whole lot of pruning, but the watering is really key. So if there was one that was more important than the others, probably the watering. But again, if you did watering and fertilized but never pruned, something's going to go haywire. You're going to have issues. If you were pruning diligently, throughout the years and fertilizing, but you never changed the watering schedule, or if you did great at watering and really good at pruning, but you never fertilized. So you can get the idea that something in each of these 3 categories has to be done, and it should be done regularly throughout the season. So let's start with watering. There's several different ways, obviously, of watering and the systems and things that are out there. So I want to talk about hand watering, which is really important, and I think it's not isolated only if you have no sprinklers and no irrigation system that you would have to hand water. There are cases, and I think mostly we should be hand watering in conjunction with automatic watering. So there's hand watering, automatic watering, drip systems, sprays. You can have weather sensors on the automatic timers. I want to talk a little bit about drought-tolerant versus, water-loving plants and how those watering conditions vary. So really, it just comes down to knowledge, understanding what it is that you're trying to do, what type of plant material do you have, what conditions is it like, and give it those conditions. So start first by knowing for sure that plant grows here in this area. Find out what its watering habits are and what it likes, and try to emulate that, try to simulate that, and try to get, like, if we all have drip systems mostly now, so if all the plants are all in the same drip system, and one plant or one area, seems to be either overwatered or underwatered, or those plants don't grow, it could be that you have water-loving plants and drought-tolerant plants maybe on the same line, and so think about that when you're getting the plants, or if the plants are already in the ground, you can adjust. Like a drip system isn't, you don't just put all the emitters out on all the plants the same, because they could require different needs. And I'm thinking of like some common plants like a lavender. It can take water when it first get it to establish, but once it's established and grows, it doesn't like a whole lot of water. And maybe you were growing something a little more lush next to it, or some type of plant that wanted a little bit more water. You can actually plug some of the emitters on the lavender and leave the rest of the line the same if the rest of the plants are happy. Or you can turn the whole system down and cutting it back over the years as the plant grows and matures. And if all the plants are kind of responding similarly, then, that's a good watering schedule. So what I do is if you're doing automatic watering schedule, the best way to do it, because I get asked all the time, like, how many minutes do I have per zone, or how long, should it run? How many days a week should it go? And so you have to decide these things. And one of the best ways to do it is to kind of have to spend some time, at least one of the days, or pick a weekend day or whatever, leave the sprinklers on for that length of time, and then go out there and look, like really eyeball the drip system. You may have to move some bark aside or some rock out of the way to kind of see the soil, and poke around in there with a stick or your finger or something to see, does it really get all the way wet? Was it long enough? Was it too short? Do I see puddling now and flooding in an area where it was on too long? And set the length of time that way. And then what you can do after a day goes by, go check it again. 2 days go by, check it again, and see how long it takes to dry out. That's how you set the days. Then okay, it took 2 days, took 3 days to dry out. Or you'll start to realize that it's still wet over here on this area. It got really dry over in this sunnier area, or whatever the case may be. And you can adjust the emitters that way too. You can cut the emitters back on the side that's getting too much water. And that way you can still you don't have to necessarily have 2 different drip zones. That would be another way of doing it. But you can get an idea that if always whatever you plant in that one area doesn't live, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a green thumb. It's just that maybe you didn't go out there and look and see the soils. There could be hard pad or more clay in that area. It could be more shady. So really think about that. So, and if you do have 2 different types, like say a lot of times it's a little more obvious. Like if you did fruit trees, you might want to have a fruit tree zone. And then if you did just ornamentals and shrubs, have a zone for those. If you had like a vegetable watering garden, have a separate zone for that. And it's easier to adjust the watering, but it definitely needs to be adjusted. It's not a set it and forget it thing. So as the weather changes, it gets hot in the summer, increasing the water is very important. Most plants, I think, will tolerate a little extra water, even if it's raining or whatever. It's just a waste of water, obviously, but I don't think the plants generally are okay. But, and that's, I think, what most people do is err on the side of overwatering, because things will tolerate it, but doesn't necessarily mean that the plants will do as well. And then, of course, there's always nobody wants to waste water. Now, one last thing I did want to mention on watering is the addition of a weather sensor on your existing automatic timer or controller, whatever you want to call it, clock, sprinkler clock, because that really has helped me immensely. And I really like it, because for us to go out really, and I mean, 3 times a year, 4 times a year at best, I'll change my clock on my own. The weather sensors have gotten really good. The one that I have is Solar Sync by Hunter. I have a Hunter Pro C timer, and I hook it up, and it actually every day thinks about what percentage it should be watering. Now, it's still, even that, you have to get in there and kind of dial it in a little bit, and it's a little bit of an undertaking where you kind of have to know how the clocks work and what you're trying to do, because you set it for a maximum worst case scenario, like summer schedule, and then you let this weather station, whatever you want to call it, sensor, it decides what percentage of that it's going to water based on the weather. So mine usually rides from 60, 70, 80%. So I get that water savings every day that it waters. Every month, it's just, week after week, it's calculating. And I think actually one of the best things that it does is it'll go up to 150% in the summer. So as it gets hot, it increases, and it prevents me from getting dry spots in my lawn Very handy. I really like it. I think it's worth 10, 15 minutes with the manual or watching a couple videos online and figuring out how to use it or hook it up. Most brands from most timers are going to have some sort of simple weather sensing. At least a rain sensor makes sense because it also shuts it off if it's raining automatically without me having to go to the clock and do it. Very helpful. Now, let's talk about fertilizing. Oh my goodness, the giant world of fertilizing. What do we do? How do we feed liquid, powders, pellets, granular, tabs, do I get homogenized, non-homogenized, micronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all this fun stuff. But at the end of the day, if you want to have a green thumb and you want to have success growing plants, this is one of the key crucial areas we need to fertilize. Plants need food. Here's the thing. In nature, leaves are falling, birds are doing their deal, fruit's coming down, everything's left on the bottom of the soil. And that soil naturally will turn into compost and fertilizer and just animals and everything. When we have our yards and our homes, we clean everything up. We mow the lawn, we get the clippings, we're raking the leaves out of the beds, we're blowing everything off. There's no natural fertilizer really happening too much, and we need to address that and feed the plants. The first thing, if I go back after doing one of our landscapes and maybe we do 50, 80, 100 plants or whatever, and the place looks fantastic, everything's got fertilizer. The nurseries are fertilizing, of course. They want their plants to grow big, quick, and they want to sell their plants. So those plants are coming in juiced up on fertilizer, and they're dark green and flowering and, healthy and doing really well. So we really need to kind of keep that going. We don't have to feed as much as the growers would, but again, that's 3 to 4 times a year. I don't think it's asking a whole lot. You could feed more often than that, and, be careful not to feed too much. But you've got the water solubles, which work great in watering cans if you have a small area. Also, hose end sprayers. You can put the water soluble in there and just kind of water everything. I really like that way of doing it. I stay away from telling people how to fertilize or what's the best way because there's so many ways. All the ways work. You can't tell. If you go to one yard that they're fertilizing everything and you go to another yard, they're fertilizing everything. I can't tell what they're using. Did they do the pellets or the tabs or, water soluble? So the bottom line is to just feed something, anything, whatever you can get your hands on, whatever's in the garage. A lot of times we let the bag sit in the garage. It's just sitting there. It's not doing any good. Dust and spiders, and get it out into the yard, fertilize. So if you just do an all-purpose and you do it lightly, read the directions. Try to, you don't want to put clumps. Hopefully that's obvious, or too much fertilizer down. You can burn things doing that, but if you just do it gently and if you're not sure, do less, but I really like the hose end sprayers because you're putting water and fertilizer at the same time. And I like to wash the leaves off. Whenever you fertilize, you absolutely have to water after. There's a couple of occasions where you wouldn't if it had, maybe weed and feed or something like that, where you wouldn't want to water. But the watering goes hand in hand with fertilizing and I think hand watering is the best way. I wouldn't necessarily fertilize all the plants and then turn the drip system on and think the drip system is going to water the fertilizer in because it's not going to do it. Grass, on the other hand, with the overhead sprays, you're fine. You can fertilize the grass. I like to do it when it's dry so it doesn't stick to the leaves. And then, of course, water right after. Definitely don't fertilize on a hot summer day and the sprinklers don't come on for 2-3 days after that. Make sure that you do a manual cycle on the sprinklers, and giving that extra water can be helpful. Or you water by hand, especially on the plant. So when you do the plant material and you go there and let's say you're doing like the pellets and the little tabs look like little BBs, get them out of the bag, and you maybe a handful, or depending on the size of the shrub, for a small, medium shrub, a couple handfuls on a large, big shrub or small tree, and you spread it out around the base. And so not clumped up or piled up near the trunk. And then you go through and you kind of spread it out through all the plants. Then you get your hose and go out there and hand water in conjunction with a drip system. The drip systems are really good and they'll water just on either side of the plant, of the little emitters, really slow. It takes a long time. It just gets these little rings of water on either side of the plant. The only bad thing about drip systems is they don't water all the way around that whole root zone, and they never really truly soak it. So I would go out there, and hand watering is healing. It's just awesome. It's fun. It's nice to you get the hose out there, and you're just hanging out, especially in the evenings, and you're just everything, you could even, I rinse off the side of the house a little bit and washing off all the plants and the leaves, getting all the dust to fall down. It feels after a rain, you go outside and it smells different. Hand watering is just, it's a great part. It's a great way to get kind of involved and in tune with what's going on. And absolutely, you'll have a green thumb. So let's just go into the whole world of fertilizer here real quick. I could do a whole show just on fertilizing, but I wanted to capture these 3 steps: watering, fertilizing, and pruning. Now, you see these numbers on there. Maybe you know what they are, you don't know what they are, but it's nitrogen is the first number, phosphorus is the second number, potassium is the third number. And there'll be something like 15, 30, 15, or you'll see some all across the same, like triple 12, triple 20. So whatever the numbers are, if you see a 0, that's on any of the numbers, 2100, that's a sulfate of ammonia. It's pure nitrogen. There's no phosphorus and no potassium. It's an incomplete fertilizer. If all the numbers have at least something on there, then that's a complete fertilizer. Also look for micronutrients. But remember that it's a ratio. So if it's a 15, 30, 15, that's a 1-to-1 ratio. So it has twice as much phosphorus for every amount they have of nitrogen or potassium. So those high phosphorus ones are more for roots and plants and blooms, supposedly. And then the higher number is nitrogen. That provides fast green leaves. That's why they're usually high on lawns. 21-7-14 is a common lawn fertilizer. So that's 3, 1, 2, 21-7-14. So it's the ratio that you're looking for. The higher the numbers are, the less amount of fertilizer you have to use. So if there was a triple 20, you're going to use less of that fertilizer than a triple 12. You just use a little bit more, but it's basically the same thing because they're all even across there. So if you see names on the bags, I call them kind of the dummy lights, like in the cars, the oil light comes on, you're out of oil. It's just, all they are is just kind of backups in case you really have no idea what to buy. If it says citrus food, it's for citrus. Now in this area, citrus need iron. Their leaves go chlorotic. They like, acidic type of fertilizer. So that fertilizer is set up for that. If you have azalea camellia food, kind of the same thing. Now, if you knew what was in there, you knew what it was doing, maybe you could put your azalea camellia food on the citrus, you'd be okay. But if you're not sure, go by what it says. If it says lawn food, it's going to be high in nitrogen. I guarantee it. The first number is going to probably be pretty high, but you could just look at lawn food and know, okay, lawn food goes on the lawn, the citrus on the citrus, palm food goes for the palms, whatever. It is kind of good to do that. Now, if you just want to buy one thing and it's all triple 20, triple 12, whatever, and you spread it out over the grass, the plants, everything, that would absolutely work just fine. It does. And, maybe the grass isn't as green as fast or whatever, but I'd rather see you do that than absolutely nothing. And there's nothing wrong with feeding that way. I still do it to a certain degree myself. So let's talk about pruning. So when to prune, how to prune, kind of generally, hedging, thinning out, shaping the plants. I'm not a big fan of making balls and boxes and these unnatural shapes out of plants unless it's a formal garden and you're doing hedging and it's matching with the rest of the garden and retaining that formal look. I am more of a proponent of natural selective pruning, and there's techniques and ways to do that. So I want to talk about that a little more in depth when we come back right on the other side of the break. Don't forget, you can always check us out on ilovetoComeHome.com. And if you miss any part of this show or want to hear some other shows, you can find us on YouTube at Chaparral Pavers, and we got all the shows right there listed for you. So we'll see you right on the other side of the break.
You're listening to Patio Side Chats with Fernando Martinez from Chaparral Pavers on California's Central Coast. Here on 1240 AM and 99.5 FM, KSMA.
Chaparral Pavers. ilovetoComeHome.com. Imagine the flickering flames and warmth of a fire pit, soothing sounds of trickling water, decorative lighting, highlighting your landscape at dusk. Driveways and patios, not only functional, but a work of art. This is what Chaparral Pavers does for your landscape lifestyle. You'll love to come home. Chaparral Pavers. Visit us now at ilovetoComeHome.com.
If you're thinking about installing a new paver patio or paver driveway, check out Chaparral Pavers online at ilovetoComeHome.com. Serving the Central Coast since 2001, Chaparral Pavers will work with you to get it right and complete the job to your specifications, as customer service is king at Chaparral Pavers. Paver driveways are stylish and durable and guaranteed to never crack. If your old concrete driveway or entryway is a hazardous cracking mess, it's time to call Chaparral Pavers. Go to their website, ilovetoComeHome.com. You'll find all the information you need. Check out photographs of past installations and reviews from Central Coast residents who have used Chaparral Pavers. And don't forget, all installations are guaranteed for the life of your home. So check out Chaparral Pavers online at ilovetoComeHome.com. Chaparral Pavers, they'll make you love to come home. Now, back to Patio Side Chats with Fernando Martinez from Chaparral Pavers on KSMA.
And we are back. Welcome. We are talking about you having a green thumb, and those who think that they can't grow anything and kill everything that I plant and I can't grow anything, nothing lives. This show is for you, and if you already have a green thumb, you might pick up some tips along the way. So we're talking about the 3 golden rules of thumb for you to have that green thumb, and that is something to do in all 3 of these categories: the watering, fertilizing, pruning. You can't leave any of those things out, so don't do 2 of them and not one of the other. Something in all 3 of those categories throughout the year, 3 or 4 times a year, not asking a lot. That is going to be the key to having that green thumb, or even if the plants are already growing and doing okay, they'll be doing much better, much happier, more blooms, more pleasure for you, and more welcoming home and everything. So when the plants are happy, it really makes a big difference on how everything looks and feels, especially if you've spent a lot of money re-landscaping your yard and spending all that time and effort and energy, if you've done it yourself or if you've had it done, to maintain it and checking the watering and making sure everything's there and fertilizing regularly and pruning things as needed and not waiting too long. It's just going to really, really make that investment worth that much more. Okay, let's get back to pruning. Now, I want to talk about, I'm not a big proponent, obviously, of the unnatural shapes like I was talking about. I really like to see more of the natural, what I call selective pruning. So when you go to prune a shrub and keep it in the shape, first of all, plants could absolutely care less whether they were ever pruned. They don't care. So we're only pruning for our own aesthetics. So before you think to yourself, oh, there's got to be some proper way that it has to be pruned, there really isn't. It's all subjective. It's all totally up to how we want something to look in a certain area of our yard. So if you want to let the plant get tall and you want it narrow, thin it out and trim the sides and let it get tall. You know, stay away from hedging plants along walkways and they kind of make kind of this box out of them. Unless you're actually making a formal hedge, it's better to go in past the walkway, take out some big branches, do your large cuts first, and kind of go into the middle of the plant, look at the kind of structure of the plant, how the branches are coming off. And if you see a big branch going in a direction that you don't want that plant to grow in, take those out first before you do the small cuts. I'd rather see you do 3 or 4 big cuts, get those big pieces of bush out of there, or tree, whatever it is, and then take a step back and look how it looks. And usually, like if you do one, you'll see a hole and a big part of the bush missing. And then say, okay, well, that's on the right-hand side. Then take another one out, another big piece, another part of the bush missing, but it's kind of starting to get this airy, kind of thinned out look. Then maybe there's one growing on the bottom, and cut that one out. Now you've cut 3 big branches out, and the bush already looks naturally thinner. It's not growing in the areas that you don't want it to grow in, and it's taking on it like a natural shape. You've only made 3 cuts, so you don't see a bunch of cuts. Part of the problem with hedging is you see all those cuts. You know, if I took 50 cuts and cut all the little branches, it would be off of the walk. I could do that with 3 cuts and have the plant thinner, healthier, with a nicer look. And then if you see a couple stragglers still going over the walk, then do your small cuts after you've done the big cuts. Because if you do all the small cuts first and then realize there's a big branch that you want to take out, there's no more little branches left to kind of fill in that hole where the big branch comes out. And those are the ones that you want, because they'll take 2, 3, 4 years before they grow to any kind of size that it would be, high maintenance. So how you get low maintenance with plants is, first of all, is to spread them out and let them be 4 or 5 feet away from each other if they grow 3 to 4 feet wide. If they've been overplanted, sometimes, we go a little crazy on the planting part and say, wow, that looks good today, but then 2, 3 years later, everything's too full. And so if you're finding yourself having to prune a lot, maybe taking a plant out in between might be, a good solution. Now let's talk about tools briefly. Your pruners should be nice and sharp. Keep them sharp and keep them oiled. Get loppers. They're big giant pruners with long handles to give you more leverage and nice clean cuts. Have a handsaw ready so that if anything, that you can't cut with loppers, you change to the saw. So with pruners, loppers, and saws, you should be able to prune just about anything. Anyway, that's about all the time we have. I want to thank you for listening to the show. You can always find us on ilovetokomehome.com. If you miss any of this show, want to see some other shows, check out Chaparral Pavers on YouTube. I want to say a special thanks to my son Gibson, who came in the studio and hung out with Ding Dong Dado today. So I appreciate you, and we appreciate you listening here to the show. So stay tuned for next week. We'll have another great show for you, and we will see you then. So have a great week.
This has been Patio Side Chats with Fernando Martinez from Chaparral Pavers. Go to ilovetokomehome.com to find out more, or call 805-588-6917. And be sure and tune in next week at this same time for Patio Side Chats here on KSMA.